Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Jackson. It's been
reunited.
We are reunited, and I'm going to take steps with my scheduler to not have this be so long between talks.
This has been quite a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been 4 weeks.
Wow. So much has happened.
Yes.
We've been everywhere since then.
First of all, we enjoyed your joyful movie review.
Oh, good.
Friday.
Which one? Oh, yeah.
The takeoff on romance movies.
Yes, that really was. I mean, it was pretty funny, actually, the way it was done. And yeah, so I kind
better
of
fill the caller. Better fill the callers.
We saw, yeah. So so I go to movies a lot, and we do on Exit a movie review, and our thing is to go on Friday afternoons as our, it's our way of providing a public service, Dan, that we get to invest our Friday afternoon so that you don't have to ruin your Friday night. So we go and see the movies that are coming out this weekend so that you're wondering, should I go see that? And we go and see it ahead of time so that we can steer you away or towards a particular movie.
You're Hollywood's worst nightmare, actually.
It's so funny though, because
Can you imagine? Somebody puts in a couple of years of work, and the movie is produced, and then they're looking forward to the weekend because Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is the launch day, and people are going to see it in the afternoon and are already going social media with everything, and by Friday evening, a movie could be dead. Yes,
it's true. And I'm telling you that I think I've saved people from going to see really, truly bad movies that just are,
really bad movies.
Yeah. And I mean, usually, but
that almost constitutes a public service.
That's what I mean. That's the way we look at it, is that people depend on these reviews to guide.
You're almost like someone who's walking across minefields so that others won't be killed by. I mean, there's nothing worse than be trapped in a really bad movie.
Yeah, my selfless duty. That's the way I look at it.
Yes. A hero.
So yeah,
actually
that's
a hero.
Good.
Actually,
some would say. Some would say.
Yes.
Yeah. So have you?
Anyway, just tell everybody that this one was a good one too, because I would not have gone. I would not have gone to this movie because it. Just looking at the kind of reviews that you get in the local newspaper. I'm still a newspaper guy, so I would look at the newspaper and I'd say, I don't know if it's worth my time.
I gotcha.
But based on your review, I will now go see that movie.
Okay, there you go. So you haven't gone yet.
And tell everybody else.
What you're saying.
Tell everybody else what it is.
So the movie is that new movie with Rebel Wilson called "Isn't It Romantic?" And yes, so she did just a wonderful job of, making fun of these romantic comedies, and it's so really well done. Are you have not seen it yet? You said, or you're?
I have not. No, because we just got back from 3 weeks at Genius. Well, first of all, Abundance 360, then Genius Network, and then a week at Canyon Ranch in Tucson. So we just got back late Friday night.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Well, let's, now this is where I want to have a couple of conversations about, we could probably start with Abundance 360 because I did the, I was live streaming.
Live feed.
live feed from that. And there were a couple of really interesting insights for me in this one.
Yes.
And I always, whenever I'm telling the stories of this to people, when I'm describing what Abundance 360 is, and I always tell the story of the way you opened the event in 2015 with the idea of imagining that we were all gathered here for the same reason, but it's not 2015, it's 1915. And we're here to see what's coming for the next 25 years. And when you looked at that and put that in perspective, seeing all the things that were going to be coming between 1915 and 1940, you realize, wow, that 25-year period, I mean, all the way from electricity and automobiles and radio and moving pictures and, excuse me, Dan. All of those things were pretty amazing, revolutionary developments that started then. And I start to see now all of these things that, we're looking at. What's it going to be like between, 2015 and 2040? And that's, when we're looking at a time where everything is exponential, it's, pretty amazing.
Well, the interesting point that I was trying to make, in that, I have 5 minutes basically to introduce Peter, and I really give a lot of thought to that because I want to do a good job, in introducing Peter Diamandis. This is the opening for the general population, who are digitally online. And Peter Diamandis, by the way, has created this amazing annual tracking. I would say it's a complete 365-day period when he goes out and scouts the people, the ideas, the breakthroughs that are at the cutting edge of technology. And then he has a 3-day conference in Beverly Hills. And so I want to do justice to set it up for Peter to come out and, really have it. But at the same time, I'd like to drop a thought, from my perspective, that the period of 1915 to 1940, the technologies that were taking hold right then were also exponential. The use of the car went exponential. Radio went exponential. Movies went exponential. Recording went exponential. So, in relationship to what had not been there before, if you measure at the end of by 1940, these technologies had really transformed certainly the United States. And I was born in 1944, so this would be for the period 25 years, pretty well, leading up to when I arrived on the planet. And, I talked to people who had been alive at the end of the 19th century. One specific woman who lived in the farmhouse next to us, and I was always really interested in her views on what had changed and how life was different on a farm before electricity, telephone, cars, tractors. Almost you could put together a list of 15 or 20 things that were very, very different, and yet basically life was lived on a day-by-day basis, and you got used to these things. So I just find that perspective really interesting. So, and we can bring it up to date with your other observations right now about the one that happened 3 weeks ago, the Abundance 360.
So that one of the things that really hit me was it really brought into light for me a thought that I've been thinking about, which is something I've been calling execution arbitrage, where there's so many opportunities now to have things executed where the infrastructure for execution is really been laid by a lot of different providers, that you can pretty much anything you can think of can be executed by other people. And I was thinking about uh, Kylie Jenner as the greatest kind of example of that. Is here she is, at
With a
$1 billion,
very small company, a very small company.
7 people on her team, and everything else outsourced, all the execution of it outsourced, right? She's doing the ideas and the IP in house with her team, and then all the execution stuff being done by someone else, and all the value is really in the layering on top of that execution. All the execution is really the commodity and expense of it, as opposed to what they're doing.
Remind me what her main products are.
So she
that come
has
out the other end.
Cosmetics.
Yeah.
So she started out, she's only been in business for 3 years or something. I mean, it was really crazy to go from 0 to $1 billion in 3.5 years. And she started out doing a lip kit. And, I guess what that means is a combination of a lip gloss and a lip liner in a, in a tube, with different unique colors and very design oriented, right? Like very packaged well and named well, and the colors are contemporary and stuff like that. So forward thinking, right? Like fashion forward. And that concept, what she wanted to do with the idea of, I'm going to do this lip kit that combines the two and have these colors, and we'll name these colors something unique, and then instead of asking, well, how do I make lip kits, or how do I manufacture these, or how do I set up a website to do all these things, she really started thinking who can manufacture this, and who can do the e-commerce. So all of her support team is all these off the rack execution providers that are available to anybody, basically. I mean, her e-commerce is all done with Shopify, which anybody could do. Her manufacturing is done by a white label partner who makes and packages and distributes the goods. And she just does the creative work. Here's what we want. Here's what we're going to do. And so there's a lot of lesson in that. And what was really sort of highlighted at the at Abundance 360 for me was the gentleman who he was on one of the Convergence panels, who has the 3D printing for auto parts with the auto manufacturers. And they're, tens of millions of dollars, and one of the top in the industry, and yet they don't own a single 3D printer. And that, to me, was another perfect example of how this dematerializing of the, the 6Ds here, how the dematerializing is really where you don't have to have all of the equipment and the tools and the stuff, where you can really take advantage of other people's excess capacity, which is 100% what they do.
Yes.
And, that is kind of, did you catch that? And what was your thought on that? Or because it was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, our eyes only see and our ears only hear what our brain is looking for. And
Yeah.
there were two main things that I kind of zeroed in on. One was the two Chinese presenters, giving one a view of artificial intelligence as it's being developed in China.
Yes.
And he was the former head of Google in China and has written a book on artificial intelligence and gave I think, a view of the world from a Chinese perspective. In other words, how things are being looked at from inside China with artificial intelligence. And the other one was both of them last name was Lee, but spelled differently, Lee and Li. And he gave a perfect example of the point that you're talking about in a place called Shenzhen, which is the part of southern China which is closest to Hong Kong. And he didn't bring that up, but I thought it was an interesting thing that this whole manufacturing area in southern China is chock-a-block. It's right next to Hong Kong. And I thought it was interesting because he was talking about how China had created this, but he didn't say anything about how Hong Kong had created this, because Hong Kong doesn't have very much land area. And my sense is that Hong Kong has used southern China to create all sorts of industry. But anyway, that's a different topic. And and that if you're thinking about inventing something electronically, your first investment should be a plane trip to southern China and actually put together what you're looking for in the same way that Kylie Jenner is looking for, and just be very, very clear about what is it that you want. And then you just walk through this whole industrial area, especially they have like this one huge building where almost any kind of electronic capability is available to you. And you don't have to actually do any of the electronics. You don't have to do any of the manufacturing. You could probably find somebody who would do it there for 10 cents on the dollar or even less for doing that. And you could very, very quickly have your manufactured electronic product, and they would package it for you. And then I'm sure there's all sorts of services that would, do the marketing around that. So it seems to me that they position themselves in this one area of southern China to be at the service of the world as using the word arbitrage execution that you were talking about there. And anyway, it was very, very interesting. I mean, I've been following very, very closely now for about the last 3 months Scott Adams, who is the cartoonist who does Dilbert, and he has a daily video cast.
That's right.
Podcast, but it's a video cast called Real Coffee. Real Coffee with Scott Adams.
Yeah.
And he said that whenever you're taking a look at something, especially if it's got political implications in the world, he said, make sure you line up both sides of a debate. And he said, so in other words, there were two individuals who were talking more or less how China is taking over the world from the standpoint of artificial intelligence and manufacturing. And he says, well, and they paint a very, very positive, very, very optimistic picture of how China is going to become more and more powerful in the world. And I was thinking, well, let's line up the speakers on the other side of the debate and actually hear what they have to say about what's going on inside China. And so I was sitting there and I said, you're kind of getting one point of view. And what told me that there was another point of view is that one of our clients, a woman who is a marijuana wholesaler, a broker in near San Francisco, she got up and asked a question, and she says, "Why is it when I go into China and I cross the border, they take away all my electronic capabilities, and I can't use any of my electronic capabilities except the ones that they give me as an alternative when I go across the border?" And there was this 10-second silence in the room. It was very, very telling. And then Peter Diamandis, who was, he was the head of the, he was actually moderating. He came in, he said, "Well, this isn't about politics," but that 10 seconds of silence really answered the question, because neither of the speakers would say a word, and they wouldn't respond to her. And I found it very, very interesting that the reason is that probably what they would say is being listened to back in Beijing at that very moment.
Wow. Through their devices or whatever, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's being live cast.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So anyway, because, I'm a bit of a political junkie, and my feeling is that there's no realm of human activity that doesn't operate outside of the realm of politics.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So that was, you were asking what my take on those were. That was the one. And the other one, I'm very, very interested in the longevity discussion. And that's one of the favorite 2 hours of the entire conference. Every time, Peter, because all the breakthroughs that are being talked about human longevity are really, they're keenly interesting to me personally.
And all the things that are, on your path to 156, all the, all the things that are just entering, third stage trials, that are, coming on board here at mainstream are going to be pretty amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah. And, one of the, not one of the panelists this year, but a panelist from last year, is talking about joining Coach. So we're just taking a look at is coming into the 10 times program this year. So I'm interested in having somebody in his industry actually in the program. That would be very interesting to me.
Nice. Very nice. I think that's cool. This whole, was there any other insight or kind of main takeaway from this year's discussions, or anything that was happening that I wasn't able to see on the live stream?
No, I think it would have been there, but there's so much that gets talked about that I think we all are like going into a supermarket, and we're not buying every product on the shelf. We're just buying what's on our list,
Yes.
And each of us has our own list, what we find interesting or not interesting for our own purposes. But there's one thing, and that was a shift, and 2 shifts that I noticed just coming away from the conference after 2 or 3 days. Is the word disruption was not used nearly as much as it has been in the past, and the word transformation was used, and that was a main point of mine, is that disruption in itself has no value. It's how a disruption is kind of the introduction of something new, which then has to be transformed for it to be of value, a general value. So that was a big thing. I noticed there was a shift in language. And the other one is the positioning as artificial intelligence, not as some sort of general intelligence, but as a narrow intelligence. It's a maximized narrow intelligence. And that was a real shift from the way it's been talked about before. It's been talked about like there was going to be this super brain that was going to be smarter than all of our brains. And more and more it's being talked about, in particular areas we can maximize a particular type of intelligence that will assist human beings in a way that our brains don't work well in that area. So we'll have
Right.
artificial intelligence. So that, and that seems to me more the way that I'm seeing artificial intelligence coming on board.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. I think that we're really going to have is an opportunity is using it as an advantage, just with actually knowing instantly the knowable stuff. And I think Peter at one point called it perfect knowledge, right? Of knowing everything that's knowable about something at your fingertips. That I think is going to be a very useful thing that we can tap into very quickly. But you've always said it that the it's the human thing that's going to make this really the most useful. Just like the chess champions. It's not that an AI is the leading beats all the chess champions. It's the AI enabled chess masters who have the nuances and all of the things, but have the data crunching abilities to reinforce their decision making, I guess, really, right?
Yeah, I was thinking that humans have actually been good at this for a long time. And I just thought back to something that I had read maybe about a year ago. It's that all dogs, so, in Toronto, there's a lot of dogs, there's a lot of dog owners. And it's just amazing the variety of dogs that you'll see just in about a half hour drive from our home to the office.
Yes.
And, this morning I saw, a Great Dane, probably one of the bigger dog breeds, and a Pomeranian. And they were, it was about 1 minute between me seeing the one and the other. But what they've done is that genetically, every single breed of dog goes back to a handful of wolves.
Okay, right.
There was a crossover at some point where a wolf just decided to tap into the arbitrage execution of human beings.
Right, exactly. Hey, wait a minute.
Where the wolf said, life is really dangerous, nasty, and short on the wolf side. The humans seem to have some things worked out where, if I could just work out some sort of cooperation with humans, I have to restrain some of my more aggressive instincts. But if I can work out a deal with one of these creatures, maybe we can work out. And there was some human who had exactly the same thoughts. But
yes.
I was saying that probably, if you think about a wolf as a kind of a scary or out of control technology that you don't really understand, and they must have been a fearsome foe because they didn't operate as individuals; they operated in packs. So that must have been a real threat to humans at a certain point. So what do humans do? They take one of the wolves, one of these scary forces out in nature, and they domesticate it, and then they use that dog now, the crossover wolf, they now use that dog to protect them and warn them against wolves.
Oh, yes.
And my feeling is
that's what AI
is. We'll do the same thing. We'll do the same thing with artificial intelligence. That which seems fearsome and out of control about artificial intelligence, we will domesticate artificial intelligence to protect ourselves from it.
Mm. That's really interesting. I mean, that whole Yeah, so much about that. I've just been really I've been kind of playing around with this idea of the of AI and around uh, what's been happening here, the things that are going to shape the next coming future here. And I always look at it through a real estate lens, um, as one of the hats that I kind of wear here, or one of the lenses that I look at things, how it's going to affect um, the real estate industry. And I've had this really interesting thought of just seeing all the things that are culminating right now, like with AI and um, ghost restaurants and all these kind of like things that are coming around here, right? That a ghost restaurant that only exists in Cloudlandia, but will deliver the
Mm-hmm.
food right to you on the mainland, kind of thing. And I got this idea a little while ago about potentially I just look for components of things that you can kind of piece together. And I saw this um, article about AI that is making photographs of people that don't exist. And
I
there's
saw it. I saw
actually
it yesterday. Dean, can I tell you? I saw it
uh
yesterday afternoon,
okay, there's
and
a
I was going to
website.
bring it. I was going to bring it up as a topic on this
Oh
podcast.
well,
Isn't that interesting?
we're in sync.
We're in perfect sync.
There's a website called thispersondoesnotexist.com.
Yes. Yes.
And all it does is you go there and it brings up a picture of a person that an AI has created as a photo amalgamation of
Yes.
a bunch of photos out into the world. And it makes an infinite supply of people that look photo real that do not
Yes.
exist.
Yeah.
And I thought that is just like, that's fascinating to me. And that was really, um, the next level of this, because that's been on my radar for a while. But the fact that this website exists now that will create them like that. Well, I've had a little experiment here. This is my kind of experimental fantasy, is to take create a virtual, a ghost realtor that doesn't exist, and turn them into the number one realtor in a marketplace. And
Mm-hmm.
so my thought was I had Get Magic go and research I had them get the list of the top female names from the 90s, the top 100 female first names from the 90s, and the top 100 surnames. And I had
Mm-hmm.
them spend just 1 hour going through and picking unique, interesting sounding combinations of uh, female first name from the 90s with one of the top surnames, and search for um, 3 and 4 syllable combinations that are .com available. So you could get
Mm-hmm.
the .com of this person. And so I had them just spend an hour doing that, and they came up with about, 30 different combinations that were .com available. And among them, one was LilyMadden.com.
Lily
As
Madden.
Lily Madden, which just sounds like relaxing, and it says kind of the right things. And so my thought was then to match that with an AI image of
Yes.
what would Lily Madden look like. It's like the modern day version of Betty Crocker or Duncan Hines, or whoever way back then.
Yeah.
uh,
Absolutely.
it's that level of this to create a
Colonel
modern.
Sanders.
Yes, exactly. Well, Colonel Sanders was a real person.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
real
Sort of.
colonel.
Sort of.
Yeah. uh,
Yeah. And
but
you're a general.
yeah. And so I just think that idea now is because I've got already the systems, like essentially everything that I've invested in doing for the real estate agents over the last 30 years has been to create systems that get them business without them having to make any outbound phone calls. Everything I do is just to get people to call them on the phone or email them and say, "Can you come and help me sell my house?" Which I could literally do that as Lily Madden and have anybody call, and then when they call, have an intro to Dan and Babs. We work with Dan and Babs in the beaches, and have them. You now give them a call as part of the Lily Madden team, and it's such a it's an interesting thing that could be um, a really viable um, path here, because it takes away.
There's two other technologies that you can combine with that. One
Tell
is
me.
Peter, again, this is the second year in a row, he gave the Google example of someone phoning for a hair appointment, and there was a real person at the shop where the cuts would be made, but it was an AI person actually phoning.
Yes.
And the person at the other end who took the appointment really showed no
indication,
no evidence,
indication
that they knew that it was an AI talking to them. And the AI had a very sort of spontaneous, casual way of talking.
Yes, even with ums. With the ums built in.
And taking a while, pausing to think something through when she was provided with the information, and then just very chatty, very informal, very, very personal. The other one was the case where the person who's created a national real estate company that exists as a virtual company, but they actually have no bricks and mortar. He was a broker there, and he's got
EXP.
a company that So you have those two technologies. Now think of Lily Madden as running that national organization.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, plus all the framework that you've created of identifying the 8 different ways that you can make a real estate sale in any territory.
Right.
And you're converging about 4 or 5 technologies into one, and testing out, of course, to see what works, what doesn't.
Yeah.
But it's very, very interesting. Peter Diamandis in our podcast. So we have for those who haven't heard it, it's a podcast series called Exponential Wisdom. And he was talking about that he's more and more convinced that breakthroughs happen technologically, not as a result of any one technology, but the convergence of technologies.
I agree.
You usually need about 3, he said, to actually get a breakthrough.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you think that's what we're seeing now is that as the internet kind of now moves into maturity, the cloud, that all the base layer of everything is in place, in that we're all connected online. That was one breakthrough that had to happen. Then the devices, the smartphones, the iPhone specifically, what that did for us with apps on top of the internet. And then all of these, you look at, it's absolutely right. It's 3 layers deep now: the internet, the apps on the iPhone, the smartphone, and the
mobile devices
the
themselves.
combinations of those, the apps. I mean, when you look at the top things that are happening, like Uber is essentially an app, and Airbnb is an app, and Facebook is an app. All these things are at that layer
Ghost
on top of
kitchens. Ghost
yes,
kitchens are
yeah,
apps. Yes.
yeah.
Why not? Why not Lily Madden?
Why not Lily Madden? That's my point. That's exactly right, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
I'm pretty
really.
excited to document this journey,
Yeah. Yeah.
Because why? No,
And
I look at these things. I've got my Go Agent Academy coming up this weekend here, right? And every uh, time, we have people will play the voicemails of that they got from people that they've been doing our Getting Listings program, where we mail postcards or run Facebook ads and send people updates, and then they call and say, they play these voicemails of people saying, "Hey, I've been getting your newsletters now for almost a year, and we're ready to sell our house. Can you come out and help us?" And that is like a done deal. And yet these agents have never had any interaction with them, and they didn't know. They've got no idea who Kenny McCarthy is or who Tony Kelsey is until they start mailing them these newsletters. So it may as well be Lily Madden. It's it's like there's no way to know, and so I'm super excited about that, because that allows now another layer for the agents to just tap into an execution arbitrage, that they don't have to now learn how to do the Getting Listings program or do any of that stuff. They can tap in to ready to go. They can just tap into somebody who is ready to list their house now, and they tap into it through their arrangement with the Lily Madden team.
Yeah. It's very interesting. There's a book out called Who Do You Trust? Rachel Bosman, I think, or Bronsman or something. And it had a lot of things about, Airbnb and Uber.
Yeah.
And they were talking about, babysitter services. There's a babysitter service that she went into in quite detail of how do you trust, ordering a babysitter to come. And she was talking about the layers of verification that have to be there for for parents to feel good about having a stranger come into your house when you're not there and actually taking care of your children. I mean, it's probably an extreme trust situation where if you're creating a service like that, you have to you really have to think things through from the customer's point of view, of what would worry them, and then you have to put in place things that would give them assurance. So what you're talking about is that you have to take a look at it from the standpoint of someone either buying a house or selling a house, and what's going to be their trust worries. How do I know that trustworthy where you're talking? So you've really got to make Lily Madden one of the most. You got to make her Betty Crocker of the 21st century.
Yes,
Betty wouldn't give you a bad recipe.
Right. That's the truth, isn't it?
Yeah, and she wouldn't have her name on a product that would, in any way, endanger you or disappoint you down the road.
Right.
So my sense is that the fundamental factor of trust, and one way of dealing with technological change, I think, is to say there's going to be one human factor, regardless of what the technology is. There's going to be one human characteristic, and it has to do with what do I trust.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to read that book too. That's a nice one. Who do I trust?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who do I trust? Who do you trust?
Who do you trust?
Who do we trust? I think it's who do you trust? Yeah, I could look it up here, but
okay.
Anyway, but the one thing that's really worth looking at in this book is a whole chapter she has on the dark web, and it has to do with the drug trade on the dark web. In other words, that these are essentially dealing with drugs which are illegal drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you're ordering them on the web, the dark web, which I have never.
It's such a. It's one of those names.
No, I've never looked into it, and they said, and somebody told me, well, here's a code that you can go in that takes you into the dark web, and I said, I don't think I'm gonna.
Yeah, let's not. I'm pretty happy with the light web, the Disney web.
I like the, it's. I don't think I'm going to go there, but she went there, and she found out that the most trustworthy service on the dark web is actually the drug trade.
Wow.
And the reason is because it's set up to have instant reviews on the part of customers about whether the service was good, whether the quality of the product was good, whether the way that they shipped it to you was first class and everything like that.
Yeah.
And she when she gets to the end of the chapter, she makes a more interesting point that ordering drugs on the dark web is much safer for you than trying to buy it on the street.
Wow, that's
in
interesting.
other words,
and it's all. I'm sure it's all.
The drug trade in Cloudlandia is much more safe for you than the drug trade in the mainland.
Yeah. And that's really interesting. And they ship? Is that what's happening? How do they?
Oh no, they ship. No, they
wow.
ship. They ship by FedEx and UPS. And
wow, that's
else.
something.
And they're dog proof. The packages are dog proof.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
They have technologies that they can pack the drugs and ship them by mail, or they can ship them by FedEx or UPS, and the dogs, sniffer dogs, will not detect these packages coming through to your house.
And I imagine it's all blockchain and cryptocurrency for.
I don't know how. I didn't. Since I'm not going to do it, I didn't.
Right.
I didn't inform myself of the complete details on how to order drugs, since I'm not going to do it.
Right.
But I found it really, really interesting that the level of integrity in in an area that's essentially illegal was much higher than if you just knew a local drug dealer. That would be much more dangerous for you to actually know a person who's involved with drugs than to do it. So you could have Lily Madden, Lily Madden's trustworthy drugs on the dark web.
Trustworthy drugs on the dark
web. You'd buy drugs from Lily Madden.
Yeah, exactly. With a name like Lily, what could go wrong? Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have Lily come over and, she'd take care of your children while you're away for the night. And
yes.
That's a really interesting thing you've done, though, just to find a terrific name.
Yeah, and I think that it took, again, I've been training myself to always think who, not how, and just instruct, get magic to do that for me, spend an hour and do it. And that's what came up with. I love that.
Yeah. Can I give you a little report on our Who Dap hours?
Yes, I'd love to hear.
We finished one quarter of Whoing up 1,000 hours. So this is at the 10 times the ambition level of strategic coach, where I have slightly more than 500 participants, and we presented them all with the challenge of having a common project that based on their own deadlines when they wanted to do this, but they would shift 1,000 of their hours from what they're presently doing to entirely new purposes. So on average, we figured out that most people had about 2,200 hours that made up their work year. And remember, these are people who take free time for the most part, you know. So, so they're an unusual sector of the entrepreneurial world in the sense that they take more free time than the average, you know, the average entrepreneur. But in the first quarter, and this is based on three quarters actually giving us their numbers. So it would be, you know, 370 or so entrepreneurs. On average, in the first quarter, they freed up 350 hours.
That's awesome.
Now, I'm going to project that for all 500, but that would be 170. That'd be 500. That'd be 175,000 entrepreneurial hours freed up in one quarter.
Imagine that. And now they're redeployed into game changer activities.
Or, you know, personal time, more time with their kids, reading, spending more time with fitness and health, you know, investigating new technologies, investigating new capabilities, whole bunch of things. So it's strictly their, you know, it's strictly their call what they want to do with the freed up hours. And but some tremendous breakthroughs. I mean, we had easily, and this is just by my head count of what I know, there were about 16 that freed up more than 1,000 in the first quarter.
Well, it's been very. I've been finding that as a. I kind of revere the time more when I look at this. You know, it's funny how elegant the 80-20 is, right? Like when I was doing the math on what my, because that's been my thing for such a long time is hooing myself up to find that I really had hooed myself all the way to a 417-hour obligation for my all my stuff. And so realizing I had already hooed up the 1,000 hours. But to look at that 1,000 hours, 1,000 hours is about the equivalent of, 20 hours a week, right? In that same kind of thing of what we look at, which works out to be, if we take our 100 Jacksonian units of a day, our 10-minute 10-minute Jacksons, that it works out to be about 200 or 20 Jacksons a day. Works out to be about 3.5 hours, 3 hours and 20 minutes, which works out to be about 20 hours on a regular
average work. Average week.
Which is kind of just so elegant, which also then we found out is also the optimal amount of engagement for longevity, right? For your brain to be performing at optimal levels requires about 3.5 hours a day of engagement, 20 to 25 hours a week. So there's just so much elegance around that is really great. And when you get down to the thing where your hours that you're spending are multiplier time, in things that your 3.5 hours are the tip of the iceberg that can deploy so many other hours because of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really tells you, you know, why inequality between human beings exists in the world, because you can take any two individuals, and one of those individuals is going to be superior in thinking about how to get other people to do their goals, to actually achieve their goals. And I don't care. You can take any two human beings at random around the world and just measure in a week how each spends their time to actually get results, and one of them will be superior to the other one.
And help me. I'm gonna share with you something, and maybe you can help me tie this together, because it's something that I've been thinking about that kind of goes with this execution arbitrage idea and the who, not how, and only doing things that are uniquely what you can do, adaptive challenges, as Wyatt Woodsmall would call them. That I've started using a Rubik's Cube as a metaphor, in that I got to thinking, could I've never done it, but without any instruction, if I gave you and I a Rubik's Cube, and let's say that we went up to your cottage for a weekend, could we, without any kind of instruction, figure out how to solve a Rubik's Cube? I mean, we're both pretty smart and analytical, in the way we approach things, and maybe we could get close or figure it out, right? But it would take hours, and it's unknown whether we would be able, between us, to solve this. But just to know that there are people who know how to solve a Rubik's Cube. And there's actually an algorithm of 28 steps, 28 moves, that if you do these 28 moves in order from any state that you find a Rubik's Cube, from a mixed up state, that if you do these 28 moves in order, somewhere at the minimum, the 20th move, but definitely by the 28th move, somewhere between 20 and 28, any Rubik's Cube will pass through a fully solved state in those 28 moves. So if you know those 28 moves, you could figure it out and do that. Right now, you'd have to fumble your way through it. If we had an envelope that we took up with us, and when we reached our frustration level, we could look at that. Yeah, and then I could read the algorithm, and you could do the moves, and we could solve it much quicker because this algorithm is there. But then there are people. I was having this conversation with someone at dinner, and they texted me later in that night, because it just seemed, serendipitous, that as they were walking down the street, there was a guy holding a sign that said, "I'll solve this Rubik's Cube in less than 2 minutes for $1." So the idea is, he's going to hand you the Rubik's Cube. You're going to mix it up, scramble it up, hand it to him, and he's going to take it from there and completely solve it in less than 2 minutes for $1. And I started thinking about the metaphor there, the levels of, like, if the end result, if all we're trying to do is solve this Rubik's Cube so we can trade that Rubik's Cube in for $1,000 somewhere, that the actual like the work involved, the end state is that it's now worth more money, that it doesn't make any amount of sense to spend any time on the activity of trying to solve a Rubik's Cube yourself, when there's already a marketplace for it for $1. And you could take that arbitrage and trade that $1 that you spent for that finished Rubik's Cube
Yeah.
for the thing, and you just skip right to the front of the line that way.
Well, here's just shifting to a certain extent, we're all born with a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
And the Rubik's Cube is called life.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And some people, just don't really make any progress on their Rubik's Cube. From the moment they're born, they just don't make it. And some
but I think
some
about,
baby,
yeah,
some baby, some baby's born with and say, I'm just going to cry here for about 15 minutes, and I want to see. I'm just going to cry for 15 minutes and see if this adult will solve the Rubik's Cube for me.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
I thought about Mrs. Jefferson and her Dean is able to achieve excellent results with what seems like little effort. Imagine if he tried to solve his Rubik's Cube.
Yeah. No, but I mean, it's a general thing, and my feeling is that the smartest trait of humanity is always looking for the who.
Yeah.
Who will figure out the how, and that maybe human intelligence expands in that one, not doing the how, but looking for the who. And maybe that's the expansion of human intelligence is entirely the product of that happening billions of times, now with the larger population, that we're getting smarter, not because we're individually getting smarter, within our own brains, but it's getting outside of our brains that makes it smarter.
Yeah. Really interesting, though. I mean, it's just, you start to see, I just look for all these things now where is there already a marketplace for this?
Oh, yeah.
Somebody is in almost anything. It's like what Kylie, instead of trying to solve the Rubik's Cube of how do we make lip kits, is somebody already selling lip kits for $1 that I can just tell them what color I want and they could do it for me. That's really, it's just so much fun. This is really what an adventure entrepreneurship is.
Well, it is. And remember that the starting point of this is the joy of procrastination.
Yes. I think you're right. And that's really the thing that
if you're not a procrastinator, you wouldn't have really investigated any of the things that we've talked about over the last 2 years.
Yes.
Would not have talked about them. We would not have talked about them.
We'd be too busy
we'd be too busy doing our house.
Yes, working on our stuff to stay on top of it all, to get ahead of the game.
Yeah. And it was very, very interesting. I just should leave this. So Ned Hollowell, who's very, very famous.
I was just thinking about Ned.
Yeah, well, he was at Genius Network last week.
Nice.
Week before last. And he's coming out with a new book called Vast, which is a new name that he's applying to ADHD. So I ordered 600 copies for whenever it comes out. I told him, look, all your other books have been good, so I'll do this. But we were having dinner, and he was saying, the problem is the cell phone. He says the cell phone has been disastrous for ADHD people.
Oh.
And he said, I just don't know anybody who, any of the ADHD people who, where this isn't a problem. And I said, well, now you do.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
And I told him the story that you, Dean Jackson, represent 90% of my minutes during any 12-month period. And, as a matter of fact, when I hang up here, that will be it for my cell phone until I talk to you in the next. I have no other reason to use my cell phone between this talk and the next talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to see, with the exception of texts to Babs and impossible changes in my limousine service, I'm going to see if I can get through the next 12 months with you just maybe even more than 90% of my cell phone time over the next year. And he said, how do you do it? And I said, well, I found who will handle the how.
Yes.
And I said, phone calls are coming in for me every day. People are asking this, they're asking that, they're doing this. Can Dan do this? Can Dan do this? And if it's important enough, first of all, about 95% of it is answered with a no. No, Dan wouldn't be available for that, so that handles that. And then in the yeses, I'm kind of informed about what the request is, and then there will be actually usually a Zoom call or a conference call where we actually talk about this. And I say, well, before the meeting, have the other person send me an impact filter so I know what this is about. And so I've just taken the position, as much as possible, I'm going to see if I can get through an entire year without using my cell phone, and see what kind of very interesting who's are and who structures are created simply by having that goal. I'm just not going to use my cell phone, but I am going to be informed. I'm not going to miss things that I should not miss, and life is going to go on like that way. So it's been very interesting for me. Yeah. So anyway, I just want you to know that you won the jackpot on Dan Sullivan's
a monopoly. People want
a monopoly,
a monopoly,
a virtual monopoly with a little bit of charity on the side.
Yeah, I like that. Well, that's that's a feather in my hat, as you say.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
and it's been a good choice of monopoly on my part.
I think so. Thank you. This is awesome. Well,
okay, Dean.
Yeah, we've gone. I can't believe it, but we're over our hour here. So
yep, and we'll talk again next Sunday.
Perfect. Let's not let it be so long.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Bye.
Okay. Bye.